Youth is like a flower that is cut down. Job 14 verse 2. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. In these words I would observe 1. What man with respect to his present life is compared to, namely, a flower, which is a beautiful pleasant part of the plant that most commonly is put forth in the spring, in the pleasantest part of the year, and then appears fair and flourishing. And 2, we may observe 2 things wherein he especially resembles a flower, namely in his beginning and end. 1. In his beginning or his coming forth, he is like a flower. A flower in the spring of the year soon comes forth. It is not long a putting out. In a day or 2 after it first begins to put forth, it appears in full blossom. So man comes forth quickly. Soon after he comes into the world, he grows up. He comes on to the stage of action and begins to make a fair and promising appearance, is useful in the family to which he belongs, and is taken notice of by others, grows in stature and understanding and action. He is like a flower in his end. He is cut down. The flower that comes forth is soon gone. As it comes forth in a day or 2, so in 2 or 3 days more it is gone. Presently, after the leaves of the flower are full spread out, it falls. The wind blows it away off from the trees, and the flower that grows in the field, in the midst of its flourishing, in its most blooming state, is oftentimes cut down at once with one stroke of the scythe. Doctrine. In speaking to these words, I would 1. Show how they are applicable to mankind in general, and 2. Especially to those that die in youth, and then make some improvements. 1. It may well be said of every man, he cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. Man is a creature that God hath set in honour. He is, as it were, the flower of the lower creation. As the flower is, as it were, the crown of the plant on which it grows, so is man the crown of this lower world. God hath given him a more comely and majestic aspect than the rest of the creatures. He has endowed him with excellent faculties of mind. But death soon comes and puts an end to his being in this world. How fair and flourishing soever he appeared for a while, he is cut down, and then he ceases any more to make a figure in human society. However fair and comely in body he was, death mars his beauty, changes his countenance, and sends him away. How considerable soever he might be amongst men, death turns him to vile dust. How dear soever he was to his friends and relations, death soon takes him from them, and makes that alteration in him that they desire to have him buried out of their sight. When a person is dead, he never will be any more in this world. He is gone where he shall not return. There is hope of a tree that is cut down, that it may sprout again, and that the tender branch thereof will not cease. Though the roots thereof wax old in the earth, and the stock thereof die in the ground, through the scent of water it may bud and bring forth boughs like a plant. But man dieth and wasteth away. Yea, man giveth up the ghost, and where is he? As the waters fail from the sea, and the flood decayeth and drieth up, so man lieth down and riseth not again, till the heavens be no more. Job 14, verse 7 to 12. When he is dead, all his concern in this world is at an end. But 2. This is especially applicable to those that die in youth. Here, first, a person in his youth may fitly be compared to a flower, as flowers do mostly appear in the spring of the year, when the year is in its beginning and all things are putting forth and growing. So youth is, as it were, the spring season of life. As to those herbs or plants that are but of a year's continuance, the time of their flowering or blossoming is in their youth, or in the former part of their life. Towards the close of the year, they are wont to bear seed or fruit. So youth is the former part of life. The flower is the fairest and most beautiful part of the plant. The flower at first appears fresh and lively, and very pleasing to the eye, and sends forth a pleasant fragrancy. So is the time of youth a time wherein human nature makes the fairest and most blooming appearance in many respects. The body then is in its greatest comeliness and activity. Then oftentimes persons appear As a pleasant flower, their faculties begin to bud forth, and they are pleasant to their parents and other relations, and they are pleasant among their companions. When the plant is in the flower, it seems to rejoice. How do the trees in the face of the earth in the spring, when covered with flowers, seem to be joyful? So the time of youth is a time wherein persons are wont most to rejoice in the good things of the world. Then their spirits are most lively, and their appetite strongest. Then they have the greatest relish of the comforts and pleasures of this life. Then they are most disposed to merriment and diversion. The flower is a very promising part of the plant. It is not only in itself very fair and pleasant, but it promises fruit to succeed. When we see a tree full of flowers or blossoms, then we hope that it will bear well that year. So youth is in an age wherein persons are commonly full of hopes and promises to themselves of the good and prosperity they shall see in the world. They are just entering upon the stage of the world, and they promise themselves much that they shall see and enjoy afterwards. And their parents and friends also are ready to promise themselves much future comfort in them, and are full of hope of seeing of them settled, and oftentimes are full of hope of the figure they will make in the world. A flower is a part of the plant that is very sudden in its growth. So young persons but very lately received an existence. They are, as it were, suddenly come forth and come upon the stage of the world. Second, when young people die, then the flower is cut down. A flower is a part of the plant that appears furthest from death, and yet is nearest to it. There is no part of the tree that appears so lively as the flower, and yet no part of it that is so short-lived. How soon does it vanish? How soon does the wind blow it away? This implies two things. One, that death puts an end to all this pleasant, promising appearance of young persons, and to all their concerns in the world. Two, it sometimes doth this suddenly. The flower then is cut down with a scythe. It falls at once. At one moment it stands in its flourishing state, and the next it is cut down. So it is, as it were, oftentimes with young people. How often do they die without many days' warning? It is unexpected. They have little time to think of death. Disease seizes them strongly, baffles all medicines, and hastens them out of the world. Application. The use that I would make of what has been said is to exhort and beseech the young people that are here present to get ready for death. What you have now heard from the Word of God, you have lately seen verified in the providence of God. There have been several instances of it in the town. God tells you in his words, and has now been telling you, how that man cometh forth as a flower and is cut down. And he has not only told you so, but he has been shown of you that it is so. He has cut down one flower after another of those that were but lately come forth, that were, as it were, just in the blossom. He has spoken not only once, but twice, yea, thrice. God is pleased to cut down some to warn others. He awfully takes away some by death, that others that survive may take warning, which is much more than if God only spoke in his word to give you warning. When God slays one to warn others, such a warning is a costly warning, and they are stupid that disregard it. It would be stupid hardness and provoking obstinacy in you to disregard one such warning. But God has repeated his witnesses, and has called to you with so awful and solemn a voice once and again, besides 2 instances of death in those that were just entered, as it were, upon adult youth. God has now very lately taken away one that was in the very morning and blossom of life, a very hopeful young man that you knew very well, that you used to see often, used to see at meeting, there attending the public worship of God and sitting to hear his word, and one that you saw very lately publicly presenting himself solemnly to own his covenant, and stand with some others of you in the house of God, and lately sat with you at the Lord's table, and one that you have often seen about in the town, and that many of you have often conversed with. He has been companion to many of you, one that was a pleasant flower, as it were, but just bloomed, one that was a pleasant flower in the family he belonged to, a flourishing plant, begun to be very helpful and serviceable there. This flower you see is cut down and is withered and gone. The place that has known him will know him no more. Your eyes that have seen him will see him no more in this world. He has gone into an eternal state and condition. He was young as you are. He was in like circumstances with many of you. A little while ago he appeared as likely to live as you. When you lately saw him at meeting, when he lately stood up to make open profession of the Christian religion, when he lately sat at the Lord's table, when he lately was in company with one and another of you, what was there to show him to be nearer death than you are? What appearance was there of his being so near to eternity? He knew not of it. None of his friends knew anything of it. None of you could see any more signs of approaching death in him than in you or in others. But yet now he is gone. This flower you lately saw flourishing in the morning and spring of life is cut down. It is not to be seen, and you are yet spared. You as yet have an opportunity to prepare for death. 'Tis God that has taken him away, and 'tis God that has spared your lives. He has taken him away to give you warning to prepare for death. God in this instance has shown you what you must do, ere long be the subject of. He has shown you that you don't know how soon you may die. He has shown you that you don't know that you shall live till youth is past. It is to be remarked in the death of this young person that he was taken away in the midst of a time of awakening amongst many young persons in the town, to show you what need you have to improve such times to your utmost. God shows you in this instance how uncertain you are that you shall live through this time of awakening. He doubtless hoped to have the benefit of it. He was endeavouring to make improvement of such an opportunity. He was much concerned for the salvation of his soul before he was taken sick. He was afraid of death and afraid of hell before there were any signs of the approaches of death. He was concerned to get ready for death and eternity, and doubtless would have been much more distressed if he had known it had been so nigh at hand, if he had known that there was but a step between him and eternity. There are probably but very few of you at our here present that are more awakened and more deeply concerned for the salvation of your souls than he was. How loud therefore is the call to God to see you in this providence, to make haste and escape for your life, to improve the present day without putting anything off till tomorrow, to make haste and fly for refuge, and with all possible speed to get into Christ, that so you may be ready for death, how soon soever it may come. What a call is here to you, to your utmost, to improve the present season at the pouring out of the Spirit of God, whilst you have it, seeing you know not whether you shall live through it. And what a call is here to you that are awakened and concerned, as he was that is gone, to improve the time of the striving of God's Spirit to your utmost, that your convictions may soon issue in conversion. God has shown you what great need you have of making haste, for death tarries not for men. When the appointed time for men to die comes, they must die. Go they must. They must not exceed the bounds that God has set 1 inch. Let their circumstances be what they will. If you are senseless and secure, when the appointed time comes for you to die, you must go, even if you had till then neglected. O therefore let those that have hitherto neglected improve the present season and neglect no longer. Death won't wait for you to prepare yourself. If you are found under deep concern at that time, death won't wait. Therefore let those that are under concerns improve their time. Take heed of backsliding. If death should come when you are backsliding, how will you repent that you did not improve? If you die and death comes upon you, and finds you unprepared through your neglecting to take care of and make haste to prepare for your death, it will be your own fault. It will be your own foolish undoing yourself. God has not been wanting in giving you warnings. You have been much warned in the preaching of the word, and God has taken it into his own hands immediately to give you warning. He has shown you that you don't know how soon you may die. He has shown you that there is no passing the bounds that he has set. The young person that lately died did not only die suddenly, but he was, through the greater part of his sickness, very much deprived of the use of his reason, which may show the folly of promising yourselves opportunity to seek salvation upon a deathbed. God is going on still in his providence to warn you. Besides those young persons that have already launched forth into the boundless gulf of eternity, there is another young person that lives upon the brink of eternity with a consumption. It seems as though the time is near at hand when that person also must fetch a leap into an endless eternity, besides others that have been visited with sickness. Now therefore, you that are yet alive on this side of eternity, in the enjoyment of a day of grace, hearken and take warning. Be exhorted now to improve your time. Make haste, every one of you, to get into Christ, where alone you can be safe. Every one of you make haste and be violent for the kingdom of heaven, in like manner as you have lately been directed. There is a necessity of it. What madness will it be for you to neglect, when you hear so much and see so much as you do? What a pity it is that you have lost so much time as you have. In all probability, most of you neglect to improve your time. Therefore lose no more time. I can but exhort and beseech you. 'Tis not in my power to save you, but 'tis God alone. I can but set your necessity plainly before you. There are and will be some that will not regard. However, there is none that has any due sense or due consideration of things, can do any other than pity you, considering that you have never dying souls in you that must in a little time be either in heaven or hell. Considerable persons that have any love to their fellow creatures can do no less than reason the case with you. How miserable are you while unprepared for death? You don't know how soon you shall die. How happy will you be if you have an interest in Christ? You might be happy in this world. When you meet together, you might converse together of the things of God. This would be entertaining to you, and you would be always be safe. And if you should die in youth, you would be happy. Appendix to Job 14, verse 2. 3. Especially are those words applicable to some of those that die in youth. First, as some such are endowed with those qualifications that are peculiarly pleasant and promising. A flower is the most beautiful, pleasant, and fragrant part of the plant that is most commonly put forth in the spring, the pleasantest part of the year, as it was observed before. And it is also the most promising part of the plant, promising fruit. And it may be observed of many flowers that the time of their opening themselves is in the morning. In the afternoon they shut up. This, therefore, is a fit emblem of a young person in the bloom of life, with amiable, pleasant, and promising qualifications, not only with a blooming body, but mind also, with desirable natural and moral endowments, rendering comfortable, pleasant, and agreeable now to those that are round about, and giving hopes of much fruit hereafter to be brought forth, of much future serviceableness in the world. Such as these are sometimes cut down by death in their youth, as a pleasant flower in the spring and morning is cut down by the scythe of the mower, and sometimes this is done suddenly, not by fading as a leaf in the fall of the year, but as a flower that is cut down by the scythe. It is done at one stroke. Application in and use of exhortation to prepare for death. First to all, second to young people. First, exhortation. To all, both young and old, the words of the text are spoken of mankind in general, though they are more especially applicable to young people. And as the word of God shows the exceeding frailty of mankind in general at all ages, so does God's providence in the dispensations of it amongst us in the week past. First in the death of a young person in the bloom of youth, and then afterwards in the death of one advanced in years. And as the providence of God in these things is calling on both old and young to be also ready, so I would now take occasion to exhort all to get ready for death. Seeing your life is like a flower, liable suddenly to be cut down and wither, therefore make haste to get that work done, that must be done before death, and can't be done afterwards. Second exhortation, to exhort and beseech the young people of this congregation to prepare for death. You have lately had the truth of the words of the text before you, in a lively instance of one that lately died in this place, in the very flower of youth. Was the Sabbath before last here at meeting, without any sensible signs of approaching death. She was suddenly cut down. She faded like a flower. Her place here in the house of God you now see empty. This is a remarkable instance of human frailty and the great uncertainty of life. There was in this case, after she was first taken ill, speedy advice of physicians, likely means speedily used. Physicians were consulted from day to day while she lived, and the advice taken of more physicians than one, and several consultations of physicians on her case, and the means used that they jointly agreed upon. But yet nothing prevailed. But notwithstanding all means that could be used, she soon departed. God's appointed time has come, and no care or tendance of friends, means or consultation of physicians could avail to prevent death from doing its work, which may be a warning to you not to flatter yourself in a dependence on anything for the preservation of your lives, not to flatter yourself at all with that at present you see no signs of death, that now you are well enough to come to the house of God, and with any dependence on any care or means after you may be taken sick. God have set your bounds. You know not how near death is. When God's appointed time comes, nothing will save you. This instance may be of warning to you, not to flatter yourselves with hopes of much time to prepare after you are taken ill, or that you shall have any convenient season to prepare in your last sickness. It is usually far otherwise, as it was in this instance. Her pains and bodily distress from day to day were so great that if she had not taken care beforehand, she would have had but a poor opportunity to prepare. Therefore let this instance be a warning to all of you that are here present, that are now in your youth, without any delay to prepare for death. Is there not a great number of you, young men and young women, that now sit in this house, that have no reason to think that you are prepared, no reason to entertain a thought of your having any manner of preparation for death, that ever you was the subject of that great change, that you are still a child of wrath? It is astonishing how you can enjoy any comfort, how you can be so easy. What would you do if you should in like manner be powerfully seized by illness? How dismal would your case be? And what reason in the world have you of dependence that you shall not be soon seized? And why will you delay? What can you do in a Christless, graceless condition in that war? What will you do with that terrible enemy? What will you do when your extreme parts grow cold and death begins to get hold? What will you do with death? Where will you look for comfort? What will you do for your poor soul that is going to leave the body? How will you go into the eternal world? How will you fetch that leap? How will you appear before God? And as to many of you that heretofore have had such extraordinary religious affections, and thought you was converted, how is it now, after there has been a great deal of opportunity to see the nature, tendency, and way of operation of your supposed grace and its consequences and fruits? When you consider these, is there any manner of reason to think that you are truly prepared for death? Have you any solid reason to think that your change was indeed that great change that the Scripture speaks of? Will your building stand when the winds blow? Is there great need that you should seek some better preparation for death, some better foundation of peace and comfort? You know in what way Christ tells you must seek. Strive to enter heaven. Use violence. You must make it your great business. And why will you delay? Consider it. Is it wise? Is it reasonable? Let your own reason speak. Is it not worse than brutish folly? But I would take occasion from this instance of that blooming flower that was lately cut down by death, more particularly to exhort the young people here present to the following things. 1. Avoid a light and vain conversation. Don't let any filthy communication come out of your mouth, contrary to that rule, Colossians 3 verse 8. But now you also put off all these, anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Don't delight in lascivious talking and jesting, and lewd and filthy songs, contrary to those rules. Ephesians 5 verse 3-4. But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not be once named among you, as becometh saints, neither filthiness nor foolish talking and jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. And avoid all profane speeches, speaking in a like manner of things that are of a sacred nature, as though you had not much reverence towards God and things divine in religion, but could lightly bring in these things to set off a jest and enliven your diversions with them. It becomes Christians to observe that rule, Colossians 4 verse 6. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt. When you meet together, contrive that your conversation may often turn upon something in some respect profitable, tending to some instruction. Let it not be all vain, light, empty, tending to nothing in the world else but to amuse you and waste away precious time, and to establish more and more of a habit of levity and vanity, and set you further and further in your disposition from anything that is serious, tending to indispose you to all serious thoughts and concerns, and make you unfit for any religious serious business, and consequently unfit for death. Such an empty, vain way of spending time is not becoming such poor, frail, dying creatures as men are. Administers no comfort on a deathbed. It don't agree with the commands of God, will not be agreeable to reflect upon them. There may be some diversion used by young people with moderation. This may be even in that which is both entertaining and profitable. There is more pleasure, better entertainment. But there is no need of levity, no need of meeting together for nothing but to excite laughter. Consider these three texts. Laughter, it is madness. Ecclesiastes 2 verse 2. Consider how unprofitable it is. Proverbs 14 verse 13. The end of that mirth is heaviness. Matthew 12 verse 36. For every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. Concerning her that lately departed this life, there are some of you that had some acquaintance with her, knew she was of a contrary disposition. She hated a vain conversation. She manifested, living and dying, a great delight in the society of the saints. I would ask such now what they think, whether they suppose, if it had been otherwise, it could reasonably be so comfortable to us the parents. Would we have reviled the thoughts of such conversation, and the ideas of what we saw when we saw her dying and departing from this world with so much comfort? 2. Avoid those customs used by young people, and those liberties they are wont to take in company, that by sufficient experience are found to be of an evil and corrupt tendency. As, for instance, not only the gross acts of lasciviousness, but also such liberties as naturally tend to stir up lust, that shameful lascivious custom of handling women's breasts, and the different sexes lying in beds together, a custom of frolicking, as it is called, and of the so general custom of being absent from family prayer, and being out very late in the night, and those of different sexes sitting up great part of the night together. However light you may make of those things, and though perhaps you may be ready to make the reproving those things only a mere matter of laughter and ridicule, yet I hope by the help of God I shall ever bear testimony against them as things of an evil and corrupt tendency. They have done much hurt, they are occasions of much sin, things that don't serve Christ's interests but the devil's, things that have been the devil's snares to thousands, things that don't tend to prepare for death, but the contrary. I doubt not in the least, but if any wise and considerable person will be at the pains of an impartial consideration and view of things, he must and will determine that those things are of a pernicious consequences, give Satan great advantage, endanger your souls, and that it would greatly hurt the devil's interest if those things were banished from all Christian countries, and thus the devil would be very sorry. And I doubt not but that those that have used those liberties and customs, if they impartially inquire at the mouth of their own consciences, will see that they have never had any good consequence, have a tendency contrary to seriousness, do actually tend to excite evil affections, tend to hinder serious, constant, engaged, secret religion, tend to levity of mind, indisposed to serious meditation, and if so, they are unlawful. They offend them. If they are dear as a right hand, yet they must be parted with. Matthew 5 verse 30. If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. If it be apparent that the devil has great advantage by these customs, then how is the practice of them consistent with that petition in the Lord's Prayer, Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven? Let those that plead put it to themselves, whether or no they themselves don't believe in their hearts that the more serious persons are, the more they avoid such practices, and that persons the more engaged in religion are from thence, as it were, more naturally disposed to avoid them, whether the more light and vain, and senseless and lustful, and thoughtless of death a person is, or he will be likely to be inclined to these things, and whether or no devout, constant, engaged secret religion, in solemn meditation and secret prayer, is likely to be upheld by those that are much addicted to these things, and whether or no unclean imaginations and frequent lustful desires be not more commonly to be found in such as indulge in these things than others that strictly avoid them, whether gross acts of uncleanness be not much more frequently found in such as indulge in these things, whether or no a pouring out of the Spirit of God be not much less likely among those that indulge in these things, and whether, if introduced generally in the time of a great awakening, they do not quench the Spirit of God, whether or no, if we go through the world, these things be not found most amongst those that have least religion and seriousness and preparation for death. Now if so, how can those things be accounted for? If so, then how comes it to pass that so many indulge these practices? In matters that concern your temporal interest, we would have God in his providence deal so by us. We are often commanded to avoid those things that tend to lead others into sin. 1 Corinthians 8, verse 8 to 13. But meat commendeth us not to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. But take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. For if any man see thee, which has knowledge, sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Christ died? But when ye sin so against the brethren, and wound their weak conscience, ye sin against Christ. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. Romans 14, verse 13. Let us not therefore judge one another any more, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. Verse 15. But if thy brother be grieved with thy meat, now walkest thou not charitably? Destroy not him with thy meat for whom Christ died. Verses 20 to 21. For meat destroy not the work of God. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eateth with offence. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. If such practices must lead others to sin, surely they will lead ourselves. Another thing I would desire you to consider seriously with yourselves, which is whether the thoughts of your having practised these things will afford any comfort on a deathbed, or whether or no it would not be more comfortable if you should die in the bloom of youth, as one has lately done amongst us. One thing more I would put to you to consider seriously with yourself, whether if you should die in the flower of youth, you can think it could be reasonably any matter of comfort to your parents, that they could say, this my departed child was an eminent frolicker, much of a gallant, a jolly companion. In this matter you may easily believe I speak sensibly the person forementioned that lately died, in the bloom of her youth, being my own dear child. I now know how comfortable it is, in such a case, for a parent to have it to consider of his departed child, that he has the greatest evidence that his child strictly avoided those practices and liberties that I have mentioned, that have been so customary among young people, and that she never manifested any inclination to any of these things, but had them constantly in abhorrence, as I doubt not but some of you that had some acquaintance with her are fully sensible. And I can now be sensible what a bitterness it would be to me if it had been contrariwise. And as the young person that I am now speaking of was a young woman, so I would on this occasion particularly address myself to the young women here present. Let me now on this occasion, which is to me, as you will easily believe, very heavy and sorrowful, earnestly advise and exhort you not to practice, nor allow of such liberties as have been spoken of, but on the contrary keep to rules of stricter virtue in your conversation, which will be far, far more for your comfort and peace of conscience, and more for your credit and esteem, and every way more for your advantage as to this world and that which is to come. Such liberties as have been spoken of are especially foolish and dishonourable in your sex, being so contrary to that strict modesty which is, in the eyes of mankind, so much the glory of your sex. And 'tis a rule that will evermore hold good, that the more free those of your sex be in such liberties, and the more easily prevailed upon to yield to them, the more despicable creatures do they become, even in the eyes of them that at present seem pleased with them, and will flatter them, and pretend to laugh at the contrary, that they may gain their purpose and gratify their own evil inclinations. And because the contrary crosses their inclination, they will laugh at you till they see you are unconquerable, so that nothing is got. If you indulge such liberties, you become more mean, cheap, servile, and contemptible here in this world. Besides the wound you give your souls, the guilt you bring on yourselves, it will bring ruin to your soul, and a foundation of sorrow, gloominess, and dismal darkness on a deathbed. It will every way be better for you to walk in the ways of the strictest virtue, decency, and honour, and with immovable resolution and steadiness maintain your ground. This will be most for your honour and esteem, most for your comfort, most for the peace and quiet of your conscience while you live, tend most to comfort when you come to die, and tend most to the eternal salvation of your souls. 3. Another thing that I would take occasion from the late instance of death in the young person mentioned to exhort is dutifulness to your parents. 'Tis what many young people greatly fail in. They do not hearken to their counsels, are not careful to please. Exceeding contrary to these was the disposition of that person I am speaking of, being a remarkable instance of honour, respect, and duty to parents, not only maintaining a most strict and conscientious regard to their counsels, but disposed to ask their counsels in all important affairs, studiously and with great care and concern, to please them, and to avoid anything that might be grievous to them, seeming ever deeply concerned for their comfort, and ready to her utmost to exert herself to that end. 4. Don't set your heart on youthful pleasures and other vain enjoyments of this world, nor employ yourself mainly in pursuit of them. If you would be ready for death, your heart must be taken off from the world. You must be brought to place your happiness in another world. How dreadful must death needs be to such young people as set their affections on this world! On the contrary, how much will it be for your comfort? It may perhaps be thought to be from the fondness of a parent, and tender affections towards a deceased child, that I here mention again the example of the person forementioned who late died. But so far as I know my heart, what I have said and shall say of her at this time is not that I so much seek her honour and my own as your profit, and that I now say of her that she has long appeared a person remarkably weaned from this world. Some of you have shown affection on occasion of her death. She was very indifferent about all things whatsoever of a worldly nature, set in her heart on another world, manifesting a relish and appetite for divine things as her supreme good. She declared in words, showed in deeds, that she was evermore ready to deny herself, earnestly inquiring in every affair which way she could most glorify God, and do most service, and be under best advantages for her soul's good. These things appeared in her, not in a flight and pang of affection, but this seemed to be the steady, habitual, reigning disposition and bent of her mind, governing her in her whole conduct. And she declared on her deathbed that it was what she could speak to without any hesitation, that was the good that she had the supreme relish of, adding that she had not seen 1 minute in several years that, for matter of any other good she saw in the world, besides an opportunity to serve and glorify God in it. She had as lieu die that minute as not, for she never could see anything else in the world worth living for, declaring withal that it had ever been so with her, that the clearer views she had, and the more comfort and hope she had, she appeared vastly the more mean and the more sinful in her own eyes, and also ever found the most strong lively hungerings and thirstings after grace and holiness. And therefore on this occasion I would, fifth and lastly, exhort you to examine and search yourselves, you that have entertained and hope that you are prepared for death, of what sort your religion has been. Has it consisted only or chiefly in transient flights and pangs, made a great show, or has it consisted in an habitual relish, in a choice, in a bent and determination of mind for good, and holiness as the supreme good? The word of God is our rule, and this is certainly the religion that is not a morning cloud. Its light is not like that of a comet. Jude 13. And what have been the fruits and consequences of your supposed discoveries and joys and great affection? Have they caused you to make religion your business, the service of God and his glory, and your own increase in holiness, the steady pursuit of your life? What have you in practice chiefly sought after, accounting worldly things despicable in comparison? Let me entreat you to consider what you have been doing. How have you spent your time since you entertained and hope? God, in the late instance of death of a young person, is showing you what need you have to be determined concerning your hope, as it shows you how liable you are, suddenly and with but little warning, to be snatched out of the world. It has been a sad and doleful time among us, this several years, with regard to the state of religion among both the young and old, though God's calls and warnings in his word have been very many, and especially has God been remarkably testifying of his displeasure this 3 years going in the deaths of young people. Many young people have died, but yet we have continued. Oh, that this insistence of death of a young person might be a means of awakening the young people amongst us, if it might be a means of solemnizing them and leading to a serious consideration, and giving a new turn to their thoughts, concerns and conversation, and rearing religion amongst them, and so be the beginning of a general awakening and reformation among you, the young people of my flock, it would abundantly add to the comforts I have in the circumstances of this providence, in itself so bitter and afflictive to me, and I should think I had much more cause to admire God's mercy in such a happy consequence than to mourn for my own loss, though it be so great, and though the enjoyment God has taken away, as you are doubtless sensible, at least many of you, was so pleasant and comfortable while God continued it.